Hi everyone, welcome back to Raw Inspired Living. My name is Kelly. For those of you, if this is your first time here, welcome. And for those of you that are returning, I'm so grateful to have you back. Today I am going a little bit old school with you. I'm going to do a bit of a slide presentation because honestly, I really feel like this midlife metabolic process requires some in-depth discussion. And it's easier for me to do that in a slide presentation because I don't get distracted and a bit off track. So I don't want to give you death by PowerPoint, but bear with me because I think at the end of this video, you'll be so grateful because you will understand a lot more about your body if you are dealing with some of the things that comes with midlife metabolic processes. So let's jump in. We're going to talk about the hormone shift that causes midlife belly fat. We're going to talk about how estrogen, cortisol, and insulin work together as a system and what changes after 45 or when you go into perimenopause and start heading into menopause. I'm hoping today to give you a deeper understanding of what's actually happening in your body. The hormone shift that causes midlife belly fat and why the answer isn't more effort, it's more understanding. So in my last video, I covered why belly fat increases in midlife even when you're eating well and what you could do about it. But this video goes one level deeper, right? Today we're looking at the hormonal system itself, how three hormones work together when everything is functioning well and what happens step by step when that system begins to shift. I really feel like understanding this change, it really does impact how you see your body, right? And it changes what you do about it because you just have more knowledge. It really, really helped me and I hope that it will help you too. So three hormones, one system. These three don't work in isolation, they actually function as a team. So your midlife metabolism is largely governed by the relationship between three hormones. Firstly, estrogen. Estrogen is the metabolic regulator. It is present at high levels through your reproductive years, and it was quietly managing how your body used fuel, stored fat, built muscle, and responded to stress. Most women don't realize how much it's doing until it begins to decline. Number two, insulin. Insulin is the fuel gatekeeper. Insulin is released when you eat, and its job is to move glucose from your bloodstream into your cells, particularly your muscle cells where it can be used for energy. How well your body responds to insulin is called insulin sensitivity. Number three, cortisol. Cortisol is the emergency responder. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone, and one of its key roles is to stabilize blood sugar when it drops by signaling the liver to release stored glucose. It is also released in response to physical, emotional, and physiological stress. In a hormonally balanced body, these three work in rhythm. Estrogen supports insulin sensitivity, which keeps blood sugar stable, which keeps cortisol calm, and each one supports the others, right? And each one keeps the other ones in check. It's a beautifully balanced system. So let's talk firstly about what estrogen was doing all along because it helps you understand when it drops off and starts to decline, why some of these changes are occurring. So estrogen really does a lot of the silent metabolic work that only becomes visible when it stops, right? It was doing far more than most women realise. So estrogen is typically understood as a reproductive hormone, which obviously it is, but its role in the metabolic function is profound and largely invisible until it begins to decline. So insulin sensitivity. Estrogen helped cells respond efficiently to insulin, right? When you had lots of estrogen. Glucose cleared quickly and energy stayed stable. Fat distribution. Estrogen directed fat storage more towards the hips and the thighs, and it actively suppressed central abdominal storage around the belly. Cortisol moderation. Estrogen raised the threshold for cortisol activation and supported faster recovery from stress. Muscle preservation. Estrogen supported muscle protein synthesis, keeping metabolic rate higher and insulin sensitivity stronger. And inflammation regulation. Estrogen had anti-inflammatory properties. Recovery from exercise and physical stress was much faster. So when estrogen was present at higher levels, all of this was happening quietly in the background, right? You didn't have to think about it. It was all just working, right? That's how, and when you really start to grasp what's happening and what estrogen was doing other than just as a reproductive hormone, it really does start to click a little bit more and make more sense. So the estrogen decline cascade. Why midlife changes can feel sudden even when they've been building for years. So estrogen doesn't just switch off overnight, right? It declines gradually, but the effects accumulate. Each shift in the system can trigger the next, right? So step one, estrogen begins to decline. So the hormonal environment that supported efficient metabolism begins to shift, often gradually starting in perimenopause. Step two, insulin sensitivity decreases. Cells become less responsive to insulin. Glucose doesn't clear from the bloodstream as efficiently. Step three, blood sugar becomes less stable. More fluctuation after meals and between them. The system works harder to maintain balance because obviously we can't have blood sugar floating around our bloodstream. Step four, cortisol rises to compensate. So when insulin can't clear glucose efficiently out of the bloodstream, cortisol steps in, activating more frequently than it really was designed to do. Step five, central fat storage increases, the belly fat. Chronically elevated cortisol shifts the body towards storing more fat centrally, which is why midlife belly fat often feels very different to any earlier weight changes that you might have experienced, right? And muscles begin to erode. Cortisol is catabolic, meaning over time it can break down muscle. And less muscle means lower insulin sensitivity, which keeps the whole metabolic stress cycle going. So this is the cascade, and each step activates the next. And this is why midlife metabolic change can feel sudden, even though they have been building quietly over time. So I know there's a lot of information in that slide, but hopefully that gives you a little bit more indication of all the things that estrogen was doing in the background when you had lots of it. Insulin. Let's talk about insulin. Insulin is the fuel gatekeeper. So this is the most important metabolic shift most midlife women have never been told about. And I didn't really understand it either until I did my own research and understood exactly what was happening. So insulin sensitivity describes how well your cells respond when insulin is signaling them to take up glucose. It is one of the most important metabolic markers for midlife women and one of the least discussed. So what insulin sensitivity means. How well your cells respond when insulin signals them to absorb glucose from the bloodstream is insulin sensitivity. So the higher the sensitivity, the more effective the clearance, right? It's just more efficient. Now, the lower the sensitivity, it means that glucose is lingering in the blood and cortisol has to rise to compensate. So before 45, when estrogen supported strong insulin sensitivity, glucose cleared efficiently. Blood sugar was stable, so imperfect eating habits were absorbed really without much significant consequence. But after 45, insulin sensitivity naturally decreases, right? So the eating patterns that were fine before, example, fruit-heavy smoothies, long meal gaps, low protein days, now produce blood sugar responses and the body struggles to manage these cleanly. So this isn't a pathology. I want people to really try and grasp this concept, right? Reduced insulin sensitivity in midlife is a normal physiological adaptation. It requires a response, not a diagnosis. It requires us to do different things in relation to the changing hormonal environment that we're now in. So how do you support insulin sensitivity in midlife? You build each meal around enough protein to feel satisfied and steady. You pair carbohydrates with protein so your body can respond more gently. You're not going for the big spike and the crash. You're mindful with fats, so have enough of them to nourish you but not overwhelm your system. Fats are quite important in insulin sensitivity. Include strength-based movement to support muscle and metabolic health. I mean, this is so important. Walking is beautiful and we all need to do lots of walking, but it does not build the muscle that you need for your midlife metabolism. You need to put stress on your muscles with some sort of weight training or weight-bearing exercise to build better muscles or better muscle strength. Eat consistently throughout the day rather than going long periods without fuel. Those skipping breakfast, let's just move on, let's wait to eat to lunch, that is not going to work for you in midlife at all. Prioritize sleep, as this is where your body restores much of its insulin sensitivity. Cortisol. Let's talk about cortisol. Cortisol is the emergency responder. So when the body's protective system actually becomes the problem, and this is important to understand, cortisol is not the enemy, it's just that we need to adjust some things so that cortisol works more effectively. So what cortisol is designed to do, it's designed to stabilize blood sugar when your blood sugar drops. And it's also designed to mobilize resources when you're under threat. In acute situations, it is essential and life-preserving. You need it. So what triggers it more frequently in midlife? With lower estrogen, the cortisol threshold is reduced. Things that didn't previously stress your body or your system now actually do. So skipping meals or long gaps between eating, low protein intake, fasted or intense exercise without adequate fuel, disrupted sleep, including that 3 a.m. waking, chronic undereating or restriction, high fruit meals without protein support. And don't get me wrong, I love fruit. I mean, my diet is predominantly high raw. I love fruit, but I need to eat it differently in this phase of my life. So what does chronic cortisol do? What's the problem with it, right? There is a problem with it if it's chronically elevated. So it shifts fat storage more towards the abdomen, so the belly fat issue that you might be facing in midlife. It breaks down muscles over time, which affects your insulin sensitivity. It increases hunger and drives cravings, right? Disrupts sleep patterns, contributes to inflammatory imbalance, and can impact thyroid hormone function long term. So the key insight to take away here, cortisol is responding appropriately to a system requesting it too often. So the solution is not to suppress it, it's actually to remove the triggers activating it unnecessarily. Why common fixes actually make things worse, right? The standard advice was built for a different hormonal environment. So standard weight loss advice assumes good insulin sensitivity, stable estrogen, a calm cortisol baseline, and in midlife, those assumptions often no longer hold. So eating less or calorie restriction, that triggers a stress response. Cortisol rises, central fat storage increases, muscle loss accelerates, and metabolic rate slows further. Skipping breakfast or extended fasting. Long morning gaps simply they just amplify the naturally elevated morning cortisol, right? Your blood sugar drops, cortisol increases, the fat storage signal is reinforced before your day even begins. Adding more intense cardio. High intensity exercise is a cortisol trigger. Without adequate fuel and recovery, it adds cumulative cortisol load, often increasing central fat storage or belly fat over time. Cutting carbohydrates completely. Cutting carbohydrates completely is not the answer. Right? Your body still requires glucose. And when it's not coming from food, the body compensates and uses cortisol to drive glucose production in the liver. Over time, this can come at the expense of muscle, and the overall metabolic effect is often the very opposite of what you are intending. Juice or fruit-heavy cleansers. I totally understand this one. I did a 40-day juice fast, so I understand what juice cleansers are designed for. But in midlife, they are probably not the most health supportive thing that you can do if your body is already out of balance. So they've got a high natural sugar, they're very low in protein, they're sometimes low in total calories, right? And those three things, right, they trigger cortisol simultaneously, right? So it's directly counterproductive to metabolic stabilization. So all of those things or approaches are not wrong in every context, but they are wrong for the hormonal environment of midlife when you are already struggling and things are out of balance. What the system actually needs, right? The shift from fighting your body to finally working with it. Honestly, it was such a relief when I went through this process of research and I discovered how I could actually support my body, right? It makes such a difference. It was life-changing for me, to be honest. Consistent nourishment. Eating every 3 to 4 hours while awake keeps your blood sugar stable without cortisol needing to compensate. Protein at each meal. Protein preserves muscle, it slows glucose absorption from carbohydrates and stabilizes your hunger hormones. Structured carbohydrates. Carbohydrates eaten alongside adequate protein in measured portions becomes stable fuel. Measured fats, enough to nourish but not overwhelm your body. Good fats are super important for your health, but an excess can reduce insulin sensitivity and slow that glucose clearance. Restorative sleep. Sleep is when cortisol and hormonal repair really does occur. So stop eating 2 to 3 hours before bed, reduce evening stimulation, dim your lights earlier, and support the conditions to really get that restorative sleep. Strength-based movement. Muscle drives insulin sensitivity and metabolic rate, which can be changed in midlife if you have more muscle, right? So even 2 intentional resistance sessions per week makes a meaningful difference to your ongoing health and your metabolic stability. The stabilization principle. This is the key, right? Why everything else you want becomes possible once this is in place. So what stabilization means? The deliberate removal of chronic stress signals, keeping cortisol elevated and the fat storage pattern active, right? That's what we're doing. It's not a diet, it's not restriction. It's the creation of metabolic safety through consistent fuel, adequate protein, structured carbohydrates, and measured fats. What happens when the system stabilizes? Cortisol quietens, insulin sensitivity improves, muscle is preserved, blood sugar steadies, hunger becomes predictable, cravings reduce, sleep improves, and your energy becomes more consistent. Now, these changes can begin within days of a consistent rhythm, and they compound over time. What becomes possible after stabilization? Higher raw food intake, increased fruit, greater nutritional variety, more metabolic flexibility. All of this becomes genuinely supportive because the system underneath is no longer stressed or out of balance. Why this matters? Many midlife women have spent years cycling through approaches that never address the hormonal system underneath. And I know because I was one of those women, and I have done, if you've named it, I've probably done it, right? So we worked harder, restricted more, tried more extreme protocols with temporary results at best. Stabilization breaks that cycle, not by working harder, by working with the hormonal environment that already exists now in midlife. That's what we're doing. We're working with the hormonal environment that actually exists, not something that existed when we were in our 30s. Your next step. One clear place to begin, right? You now have something most midlife women don't, a real physiological explanation for what's been happening. One that has nothing to do with willpower, discipline, or trying harder. The next step is to begin applying it. So I've written a free guide, it's a free PDF, and it includes a self-assessment to identify whether your metabolism is running on stability or stress right now. It includes the principles of metabolic stabilization and a little 3-day meal structure to begin in your own home. You can just begin to stabilize your metabolism in midlife. So just click on that QR code there, it'll take you straight to the page to enter your details and download that little free PDF. If you want structured ongoing support, I have a full phased program, community and guidance inside my Rawley Inspired membership. It is specifically built for this. So if you are interested in the link for that, please just say so in the comments below and I'll get the link to you. And if this video has helped you understand your body differently, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. There are a lot of midlife women still being told to eat less, try harder, and they too need to understand why that is not working for them. I hope that this presentation, even Death by PowerPoint, has helped you in some way today understand your body a little bit better, and I look forward to seeing you again in Raw Inspired Living.